Welcome to Elite Online Link. The last chapter of Treasure Chest collection of short stories is The Gift of Magi by O. Henry. The story revolves around two young people, that is a man and a woman, James and Della. They are married too soon and it is the time of Christmas, and how they both want to gift each other the best, and for that how they lose their prized possessions. So it brings us to the theme of the story, that love is the most precious gift one could give or receive. And how did we come to this practice, or how do we know that it is a tradition to give gifts on Christmas? Because of the Magi. So we'll also learn who were the Magi. Let's hear about the author. William Sidney Potter, or O. Henry, born in 1862, died in 1910, was an American writer known primarily initially for his surprise ending or the twist in the tale in his short stories. The Gift of the Magi explores the theme of sacrifice and extravagant love. The two innocents, Jim and Della, easily sacrifice that which they hold most dear in order to afford a precious Christmas present for the other. The build-up of expectation, the breathless waiting for the return of the spouse, the sense of excited anticipation of the pleasure he or she will feel, the twist in the tale and surprise ending are just one brilliant stroke after another of the storyteller's magic paintbrush. The conclusion of the story is iconic. The author using biblical from the Bible, overtones emphasizes that only those who love unselfishly, are the truly wise. The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all, and 60 cents of it was in pennies. 60 cents out of 87 were in pennies, in coins. Pennies saved one and two at a time by bulldozing the grocer. Bulldozing the grocer means arguing with the grocer over the bill, and the vegetable man and the butcher, until one cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony, until cheeks burned with silent imputation, feeling embarrassed of parsimony that such close dealing implied. For one or two pennies when you're arguing, you're putting yourself in an embarrassing situation. Three times Della counted it. Three times she counted again. If by mistake she had counted less, so she counted it three times. $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. Obviously, this amount was not enough to buy something exclusive, something special for Jim. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch. Flop down, throw yourself on in a shabby, untidy little sofa and howl, howl, cry. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, sniffles and smiles, with sniffles predominating. Predominating where you cry most of the time. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, while the mistress, the master and mistress, master is James and mistress is Della, she is still overcoming, subsiding from this first stage to the second. Take a look at the home. We'll take a look at where they stay. A furnished flat at $8 per week, so they had to pay a rent every week for $8. It did not exactly beggar description. It was not a really poor house, but it certainly had that word on the lookout for the mendicancy squad. So it certainly had that word where people feel that they required a renovation. In the vestibule, like an entrance or a reception below, was a letterbox. In old days, there would be just inside the lobby, there would be a letterbox by the name of the owner or the person staying in that flat or apartment, and adjacent to that would be a small bell which would be pressed so that the people living in the apartment would know that they have a visitor. Like in today's time, we have a camera installed outside our houses. In some places, it is for security reasons. Sometimes it gets recorded also. So it was actually a better version, an improved version of this bell. So in the vestibule below was a letter box into which no letter would go. That means nobody wrote to James or Della, so that letter box that had the name of James was always empty. And an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. That means nobody ever came to visit Della and James. Also, appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. Also, appertaining thereunto was a card, a nameplate that read James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham, the middle name Dillingham, had been flung to the breeze during a former period, had been thrown away some time back of former period, past period of prosperity when its possessor, when its owner was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk, it has reduced to $20, though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. So they were planning to write their name instead of Dillingham only to an unassuming, unimportant D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks. So she wiped her tears and then she attended. She tried to make herself look proper with the powder rag. Powder rag, you keep a piece of cloth on the powder so that you could dab it. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a grey cat walking a grey fence in a grey backyard. Now, everything around cannot be grey. It clearly shows that this greyness comes from her own sadness. When you are not in a good mood, you feel everything else outside you is also dull. So, the grey color represents the dullness that Della is facing right now. Tomorrow would be Christmas and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. So over months she could only save $1.87. Oh God, what is this? What have I done? She's constantly thinking. $20 a week doesn't go far. You cannot manage everything, all expenses in $20 per week because $8 is rent. How can you manage for 6 days in $12? That means $2 to be spent or to manage your daily expenses. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. Expenses had been more than she had calculated. They always are. We always land up paying more than what we earn. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him. Many hours of thinking she had spent in planning what to buy for Jim. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something fine and rare and sterling, exclusive. Something just a little bit near to bring worthy the honor of being owned by Jim. Something that Jim would be proud to have owned, which should be gifted by Della. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. A pier glass, a small mirror between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in a $8 flat. A very thin and a very agile person may be observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal strips. So that was a broken, you can say assembled glass which appeared to be like a mirror. Obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, very thin, had mastered the art, so she could see herself in this very, what you can say, close to be calling a mirror because it was not a mirror. Suddenly she whirled from the window, whirled, moved like a wind, and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brightly, but her face had lots of color. She was crying, no? So her face had become pale because of crying within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Let it fall to its full length. So her hair was so long it would reach below her knees. Now there were two possessions, two things which they called as a possession, something that you get with a lot of pride or you hold with a lot of love, of the James Dillingham Youngs, in which they both took a mighty pride. They were very proud of it. What was Jim's gold watch? and that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the queen, if the queen of Sheba had lived in the flat across the air shaft, Della would have let her hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate her majesty's jewels and gifts. Very important. Here it means that if the queen Sheba had stayed in the opposite flat where Della stayed, and if Della had left her hair open to dry, even the queen of Sheba would be jealous of this beautiful hair. She would curse her all her wealth. Oh my God, I have nothing. Her hair is more beautiful, more valuable than all the jewels and the gold that I have. Della would so she would depreciate her majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon, if King Solomon had been the janitor, a janitor is a person who cleans the toilets and looks after, like how we have housekeeping. They come to your building and they wipe all the passages and all that. That's called a janitor. So the author is exaggerating actually by saying that if the king or King Solomon had been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, all his treasures, everything that he had would be piled up in the basement. Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So the King Solomon would be jealous of Jim's watch and Queen Sheba would be jealous of Della's hair. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about rippling and shining like a cascade, like a waterfall of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. It wrapped itself around her almost like a piece of cloth. And then she did it up again nervously. She tied it up again nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still, faltered. She thought she should not go ahead with what she had thought. For 1 minute, thinking, should I? Should I not, like that? While a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet because she started crying because of her plan. You all know what she's going to do? If you don't know, wait and watch. On went her old brown jacket. So she wore her old brown jacket. On went her old brown hat with a whirl of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes. She fluttered out the door. She quickly moved out of the door and down the stairs to the street, where she stopped. The sign read, Madame Soffrini, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up Della ran and collect. So again she came back one flight up, ran the stairs, then panting. So no, she went up to that shop. I'm so sorry. Panting. Madame, large, too wide, chilly, hardly looked the Soffroni. So this woman who owns the shop, that is Madame Soffroni, she looked very large, white, and it was cold there. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it. Let me check before I tell you whether I will take your hair. In those days, even today, people can get their hair if of a good quality and give it to people who make wigs. Alright? We must have seen on the internet there are so many women who have donated their hair for even cancer patients. So she said, let me have a look at it. Down rippled the brown cascade. Immediately her hair fell like brown water. $20, said Madame, lifting the mask with a practiced hand as if she was examining. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. For the next 2 hours tripped by, she went into the city looking for the best gift she could get for Jim. On rosy wings, oh, very happy, I have $20 now. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. Forget this hashed metaphor. Forget this comparison. Ransacking, looking for the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain. Fob chain is a chain that holds a small watch that you can keep in your pocket. In those days, even today, some people find it very fanciful to wear 4 layers. So gents would wear a formal shirt, a trouser, a small inner waistcoat which will have a small pocket, and an overcoat. So in this pocket, if you keep a watch, it has to be led by a chain. So there is a small handle to it which you can put it on the watch, and there is a clip on the other end to be able to stick it in your pocket. So that's a fob chain. Simple and chaste in design, simple and pure in design, properly proclaiming its value, properly showing its value by substance alone and not by meretricious ornamentation. It was not very highly decorated. It was simply so simple that simplicity itself was catching, as all good things should. It was even worthy of the watch. The watch, Jim had the gold watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. Quietness, very, very subtle to look, but at the same time, very elegant. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he had used in place of a chain. So right now he did not have the chain unless Della bought it. But what did he have instead of a fob chain? He had a leather belt that he was using, and he was not very comfortable because the leather belt was worn out. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. Intoxication gave way a little to prudence, wisdom and reason. What will happen? She got, now what she thought of doing, the hair that she had cut, alright, the long hair is gone. So how does she make herself look attractive? She started curling her hair. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by the generosity added to love. What a beautiful line. She started working to repair the damage she had done, which generosity added to love. Generosity, when you're willing to sacrifice because of your love, that you have to find out a way to make up or to make the loss of that sacrifice, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. It is not an easy task to make up the loss or to make up the sacrifice you have done to prove your love. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy, a young schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, long, carefully, and critically. For a very long time, she kept checking on looking, all right, oh, is it looking nice, all that. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. Coney Island chorus girl, like how you have a theme park or a Magica, where there are those clowns, they wear that artificial hair. So she looked like a Coney Island chorus singer girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? Now she's convincing herself. At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Probably this was their meal every evening, where you get frozen food, so you have to heat it up on a stove or you fry the chops and then you have it with tea or coffee. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She turned white, when you have prepared something nice for somebody, like your parents or like your friends, God, please make him like this, please make him like this, please make her like this, please make my parents like it. Isn't it? You say a small prayer. So, she had a habit of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things. And now she whispered, please God, make him think I'm still pretty, please, please, please. The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves. Now understand, it is Christmas and it is definitely not in India. So it is a country where it becomes extremely cold during these months and especially on the evening of Christmas, but he was without gloves. It shows that they didn't even have enough money to buy a proper coat or even gloves. Jim stopped inside the door as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. As immovable, now this is a direct comparison. When a person or when a setter is a person who catches birds and animals, At the scent of a quail. A quail is actually the smell of a particular creature. Alright, even a very young girl, when she wears a little perfume, how does one, a setter does that, or at the scent of a particular creature that he or she likes. So he was set there as a setter of scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed upon Della. He kept looking at her. Excuse me. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not read. And it terrified her, it scared her. There was some expression she could not make out. What was it? Because it was not anger, it was not surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the emotions, sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Della wriggled off the table and went for wriggled, moved from the table and went for a moment to hug him. Jim, darling, she cried, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows so awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you. He didn't even realize. You've cut off your hair? Asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me just as well? Anyhow, I am me without my hair, ain't I? Jim looked about the room curiously, as if looking for those long, beautiful chunks of hair. You needn't look for it. You don't have to look for it, said Della. It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered, she went on with sudden serious sweetness. Maybe the hairs, now this is slightly incorrect English. No, we never say hairs. Maybe my hair was numbered. Maybe. Because it is considered an uncountable thing. But she's saying maybe my hair was numbered. So one could actually, if one started, one could count the number of hair strands on my head. But no one can count, no one can measure the love that I have for you. So she's saying, but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim? Shall I put the chops to fry, Jim? Out of his trance, as if in a trance, fixed, not knowing what is happening. Yes, almost fixed over there, unable to feel the reality. He was in a trance. Jim Swing seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. He hugged her. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in another direction. $8 a week or a million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. The people who brought valuable gifts were called Magi. But who were the Magi? What was their trend? We will tell you later. That is what the author tells us. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket. He drew out this packet and he kept it and threw it upon the table. Don't make any mistake, Dell, he said about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first. If you open that package, you will realize why I was looking so shocked. Why do you think I was in a trance all the while? White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper. String is that small thread on the paper packet. And then an ecstatic scream of joy. And then, alas, a quick feminine change. Oh, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the lord of the flat. Just when she saw what she had got, from happiness, it turned into hysterical. She started crying, and immediately Jim came to her and hugged her. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped long in a Broadway window. In a Broadway window, in a shop. She had been passing by that shop and always wishing to buy those beautiful combs. Beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell with jewel rims. So they were pure tortoise, made out of pure tortoise shell with jewel rims, the edge which was decorated with jewels. The shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. It was just the right thing to wear in those beautiful but now disappeared hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved, had desired, and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. Without the least hope means she hoped that she would possess those combs someday. And now they were hers. But the tresses, the hair that should have adorned, would have decorated the coveted adornments were gone. The hair on which she could have worn those coveted, those beautiful, bejeweled combs were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, she hugged the combs to her chest, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." And and then Della jumped like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with the reflection of a bright and ardent spirit. It seemed to reflect because of the bright spirit of Della. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? Isn't it a beautiful thing, Jim? I hunted all over the town to find it. You will have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it. How well they look when we match it with each other." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They are nice, they are too nice to be used just as present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now, suppose you put the chalks on?" This is the twist in the tale. Della sold her hair so that she could buy the chain for the watch. And Jim sold the watch so that he could get combs for Della's hair. So, actually they didn't turn out to be so wise as the Magi were supposed to be. Now let's see who are the Magi. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They were actually the people who brought gifts for the on the day when Christ was born. And they are also called, because it's a stable, so it's called the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. So, even if you got the same gift, you could exchange it with someone else who has not got the same gift. And here I have lamely, in a very lame manner, related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Although they turned out to be foolish children because they sacrificed, but they were still the wisest because they sacrificed their own prized possessions out of love. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest, they are the Magi. So when someone gives you something out of love, it is not the thing that matters. It is the love behind the thing that matters the most. This is the message of the story. Hope you liked it. See you soon.